Welcome to the Gaslight Effect Podcast. I'm Robin Stern, co-founder and associate director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and author of the best-selling book, The Gaslight Effect. I'm an educator and a psychoanalyst, but first and foremost, I'm a wife, a mother, a sister, aunt, and healer. And just like many of you, I was a victim of gaslighting. Please join me for each episode as I interview fascinating guests and explore the concept of gaslighting. You'll learn what it truly means to be gaslighted, how it feels, how to recognize it, and how to understand it, and ultimately, how to get out of it. Before we begin, I want you to know that talking about gaslighting can bring up challenging and painful emotions. Give yourself permission to feel them. Some of you may want to go more deeply with your emotions, while some of you may hold them more lightly. No matter what you're feeling, know that your emotions are a guide to your inner life. Your emotions are sacred and uniquely you. Respect and embrace them, for they have information to give you. If you want to listen to other episodes of the Gaslight Effect podcast, you can find them at robinstern.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for being here with me. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Gaslight Effect Podcast. I'm really thrilled this morning to have with me Joie Jager Hyman, Dr. Joie Jager Hyman, who is an expert in the college admissions process. Joie is a Harvard and Dartmouth graduate. Joie worked at Dartmouth admissions for many years and is the author of two books that are the Bible for parents sending their kids to college. The first, Fat Envelope Frenzy, and it has a longer subtitle, but basically about how to get into the best of the best schools. And then the second book, B+ grades, A+ college applications. And Joie has appeared on many TV shows that you're very familiar with, CBS Early Show, Fox News, NPR, and dozens of other media outlets. She's published scholarly papers and popular pieces on the college admissions process for many, many years. I've known Joie personally, and I think that you are a stellar, incredible human being and have really shepherded so many kids who I've had the honor to meet and work with myself through a very stressful, difficult process, and have also taken care of their parents along the way. And I admire the skill with which you do that. I admire the wisdom that you have to share. And I'm just delighted that today we get to share it with a wider audience. And before I ask you to say more about yourself and how you even got into this work to begin with, I just want to say that at this moment in time with teen mental health really at a high, and with people feeling so much stress and moral distress and anxiety, and it's really a very difficult time for many people, and I would imagine for the college process too. So let's table that for our in the middle of the conversation place. But in the meantime, just tell us, Dr. Joie, how you got into this work.
You know, a little bit of it just came from being a nerd myself. I love school. I think I'm, just somebody who always loved September, associated it with the new school year. I did a lot of school. I have my doctorate. And I loved college. So I was an undergraduate at Dartmouth, and this was back in the day when we had mailboxes that everybody used, and they put a flyer, and all the seniors got a flyer, inviting them if they wanted to apply to work in admissions. And I thought it seemed really interesting. I was very curious about the whole process, and I applied, and I was lucky to be selected, and that's where I kind of got my start. And I quickly, it was, even when I worked in admissions, the one constant is that it gets harder and harder. So it was easier back then, but it was still selective. And I started to see really quickly, like, oh, there's some real mistakes you can make. Like you can check the wrong box, and that kind of, shepherds your application to one lane. And I kind of just like helping people. And so I started to do that. Like, oh, hey, don't do it this way, do it this way, or think about it this way. Or that's really where I started. And the work has evolved a lot over the past 2 decades that I've been doing it. I've had my own company, College Pro 360, for 15 years. And it really, the work itself has changed a lot. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, the mental health issues are much more common, much more pronounced, both for parents and for students. That's one big change. And so, I could talk a little bit about how my approach to the work has evolved as I've, as all the external conditions and the internal conditions and just the realities for people have evolved. But that's where I started. I just started being a nerd and loving college and wanting everyone to go to the college that, have a great college experience like I did.
The best fit college. Well, I think
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's one thing to feel passionate about it. It's another thing to start a company, College 360, and you have been enormously successful and I think outperformed every other college prep in getting your kids into the colleges they wanted to get into.
Hmm.
And having worked with you through the years and some of your really amazing students, I know that it's your desire for people to get into the college that's best for them. And
Hmm.
so helping kids to really go through that process and understand where they fit and what they need, I think is really amazing, is an amazing part of what you do as a company. And what what led you to believe there was a that many people who you could serve, that you need to have a company?
I mean, honestly, I'm fortunate in that the proof of concept was just the demand. Like for, most of our history, we have a wait list actually, because we really focus on excellence and quality over rapid scale. So there's a huge demand. I mean, when I first started 20 years ago, it was much more people who were looking at highly selective colleges, and they really wanted a focus on just like the application piece and how to get in and sort of, I guess, I don't love this word, but sort of package or put together what they've already done.
Yeah.
And the work has really changed to include really thinking about the full journey of high school. Actually, we start much earlier. The work itself isn't different, meaning it's a finite amount of work, but we found that elongating the timeline and giving people a longer runway actually makes it so much more rewarding and meaningful and sort of self-directed from the students, right? Because a lot of learning is trying things, but it's iterative, right? It's also, I mean, there's no real mistakes if you spend some time in a food bank and you realize you would like to work on, housing issues or something like that. That's not a mistake, right? It's all growth oriented, but we really think a lot about, both journey and destination, because I think, I've known a lot of Ivy League idiots. I'm sure you have. I'm sure none of them are listening to this, but just going to a great college doesn't make you important or smart or able to contribute, right? It's really all of those other skills, right? Finding a sense of purpose, having an impact, pushing yourself to show initiative, thinking about problems in the world that you can solve. Like that's actually what makes you, kind of set up for success. Knowing yourself also. So again, like external and internal work, that's all a really important part of this process. And, I always say to the students, like, of course I do. I hope you'll get into Duke or wherever you want, Dartmouth or wherever you want to go. But I also hope it's the least important thing that you do, because I'm really, we're really over again the past 2+ decades I've been doing this. I'm on the student side, right? I'm with them all the time, and I'm forming these relationships with them, and I want that mentorship, to really be very holistic, right? Of course, we know that people hire us to go to great colleges, and as you said, we do have great results, and I'm super grateful for that. And I think the minute that these colleges stop wanting awesome change makers who show initiative and have purpose and help others, then we probably have to get a whole new business model or close. But right now, that's very aligned, right? So, but the colleges are no different. I truly believe this. Like we all want to be around purpose-driven people. We all admire people who are, engaged in acts of service. And we are all in the pie chart of life, helping others to take up a big slice. For no matter what you do in your profession, that is how you create meaning. And I found, over and over again, there is so much anxiety, as you said. There is so much. This process doesn't make people feel good. It doesn't make them feel empowered. It makes them feel very lost, both the parents and the students. And by focusing on just to simplify, we can say helping others, right? Or acts of service. Starting there, it really helps people get out of their head a little bit, right? It really helps people get some perspective. And it also helps them find purpose, right? All of a sudden it's not transactional. They're not just working towards this college trophy. They're actually focused on something that they care about, right? Whether obviously, you could take a complex issue like criminal justice, right? They're not going to, these high school students, are not necessarily expected to reform the entire criminal justice system. But if they can really put themselves in a position where, they're actually able to ask the right questions, right? Like they're working maybe, with the DA and understanding what crime prevention is and should be, right? And what due process is, or they're working with nonprofit organizations that represent, people who are wrongfully accused, or they're working we're actually, our company is hopefully working with a nonprofit. We are working with them to hopefully start a really cool program for some of our students where they go to Rikers and they play basketball with some of the adolescents who are incarcerated there. And just getting there, just being there is such a profound experience, right? And gives us, again, that perspective that we all need. There's a lot of uncertainty and, you know, there's a lot of changes in these institutions. Either I'm not in charge of Harvard or Columbia or any of these colleges, right? But I have this opportunity, and we at our company have this opportunity to really work with students at a time when, there's sort of, a really positive and productive and growth oriented process that could take place, or an overwhelming anxiety, I'm not good enough, shut down, withdraw, I hate myself thing that can happen, right? So, our mission is the first approach, right? Really, really help people, before we even talk about colleges, we talk about you. What do you want? What are things in the world you'd like to change or be part of changing? What are issues that you care about? How do you want to help others? And it's such an amazing transformation because it really is like a muscle they're building, right? So like they'll get a little taste of some service that they do, right? And then they come to the dinner table and everyone wants to hear about it. Or what was going to Rikers Island like, for example? Like what are these kids really, none of us really know, right? And all of a sudden, they're really gaining expertise. They're gaining credentials, a sense of self-worth, because again, we really derive that, again, we're altruistic by nature. And that is not necessarily always in the conversation when you're thinking about growth and development, and even about college. Now, of course, we all know college is like service, but we really try to make those experiences very authentic and impressive. Because we necessarily want them to get trophies, and more because they're impressive, because they're intrinsically impressive. Because it's impressive to go out of your comfort zone. It's impressive to care about helping other people. It's impressive to take steps, unusual steps to learn about something, communicate something. And you start to see, this really positive cycle where their self-worth, really expands. And again, it's easier to get in because it's the college admissions officers are no different than other humans, right? We're all impressed by those things. We all want, purpose-driven young people. We all realize that we're maybe not leaving them, the best legacy all the time. And, it's inspiring to see young people who really, are curious about the world, and who, again, have taken those first steps to build those muscles wherever they may point their compass in different direction over the years. But if they start to realize that helping others should be in that pie chart of life, and it is where we derive meaning, and they start to see that they're capable of doing that, right? They really can make a difference. It just goes from there. Then they want more and more and more. And, they start to become the interesting people in the room. And that's the growth we want to see.
So I'm going to ask you to dive into something you mentioned, the stresses and the pressures. Can you, for the people listening, talk about what you see are the stresses and the pressures, and how some of those things can really affect students' mental health, and how then can we address them, the adults in their life? How can we help address, and you in your work, but importantly, parents and educators, things come up. There are, I mean, certainly with the students that I've worked with my own kids, when they went through the college process, that was 20 years ago. It was, seems like it was yesterday sometimes.
Yeah.
And the kind of pressures that they put on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
About that.
Yeah. I mean, look, so we work with a lot of students who are ambitious, right? And who are surrounded by other ambitious peers, right? They're often at top high schools that are, you know, quote unquote feeder schools, sending a lot of people to Ivy League college, like again, this is there's 4,000 colleges in this country, and that's a small slice, but that's the population that we often work with. And yes, these are definitely people with a lot of privilege, but who feel, a lot of pressure to live up to that, right? So it's not even just sometimes parents are extremely accomplished, right? School is one marker of that, but they've gone on to lead very successful lives, and their children see what all the things that their parents have accomplished. Um, it's hard to really overstate that. Like when I was applying to college, I would give everyone a time machine. I mean, it was, yeah, things were, I'm proud of my, accomplishments and credentials. And I know I got into good colleges and went to good colleges, but you really can't compare. I did watch Oprah every day, and it was great. I didn't have to stress that much. It was a lot easier. And I would give everybody a time machine because the expectations on these students, which they're very well aware of, are, so much higher. They really are kind of expected to, to have patents or published articles, or I mean, just, not to stress any of the listeners out, but the selectivity has just exploded, right? So we're talking about numbers like 3%, 4%, and that's percentages of already self-selecting accomplished applicant pool from all over the world. So, I don't ever tell people that it doesn't matter or not, like I don't try to discount their experiences, right? Meaning like it doesn't matter where you go to college. I would also advise, people listening to use those kinds of sentences judiciously. Like as adults, we do know, of course, that's true. I'm sure we've all met so many smart and successful and wonderful people who didn't go to quote unquote good colleges or didn't go to college at all. So it's not that there's not truth in that, because of course there is, but it's kind of like telling someone really upset to calm down. It's not always helpful. First you have to validate their experience, right? Validate that you are in a space where they are, articulating their hopes and dreams. And that's really important. And they're young. And so hopes and dreams are often attached to college at that stage. And, it's not all that part of it, right? Forming hopes and dreams and being ambitious and, wanting to see yourself, in a really elite kind of, arena that is based on merit. Those are good instincts, right? And so I never tell, we hold space for those, right? I think that's one of the first pieces of advice I would give to people who maybe obviously don't have as much experience around these conversations as I do, right? So telling people that it doesn't matter where you go almost never really actually makes them feel better, because these kids that's the air they breathe, right? And so I've had, I always remember this. I one of my first very, very, wealthy and accomplished families that I worked with years and years ago. This student is now graduated and married. But the father said what was sort of obvious, right? Like, it doesn't really matter, quote unquote, because like you have generational wealth. Like you probably can't spend all the, you're not going to be on the street, and we have tons of contacts, and you really have the world. You're starting on third base, right? And don't stress so much about college. And the girl just ran out. I mean, that made her so much more upset, actually, even though, again, to me as an outsider, it seemed like a kind thing to say. And I really just realized it's not about the parents. It's often that these kids they know they have to face their peers. It is a very, very public kind of hierarchy as they see it. It's just this, it's a huge sorting mechanism that they see. That's how they see it as. And, you know, to just say it doesn't matter minimizes kind of, I guess you could call it their social experience, right? Or their how they put themselves in connection to their peers. So it does matter. Their self-esteem matters. And again, you know, it's a good thing that they want to be ambitious. It's a good thing that they want to dream. Like, so we want to make space for that and help them hold that. And then, really listen to them to both, figure out what I do, and this is what I do as a professional, is, how how can they both, again, journey and destination, how can they spend their time now, right, doing things that are going to give them the self-worth that, and that they, again, ultimately crave, right? And also, what would be in the pie, if I were to do like a Venn diagram, right? So, what is the overlap of like what's their best self and what colleges want and where they can get in and be as creative as possible, because it matters to them. And it doesn't, this is like madness. Again, as adults, we know in a way, of course, it doesn't matter. We all know amazing people, who like you have distance from this and you understand that like where you go to where you go to college doesn't matter that much. And it's sometimes when you meet an adult who tells you where they went to college, it's even sometimes weird. You're like, come on, what have you done lately? It doesn't matter so much where you went to college, Mr. or Mrs. Adult. But it again, it matters to them, and not for bad reasons, right? For understandable reasons and sometimes for admirable reasons, right? They want to do big things with their life and they should want that. That's healthy and wonderful and something we want to support.
One of the things that I remember hearing from people coming up through the college process, and even for my own kids, is that in the high school setting where friends are everything, in junior high
Yeah.
school, coming into
Mm-hmm.
college, into early high school, suddenly they're in this college process where, as you said, they're measuring themselves against other people and sorting themselves. Where
Mm-hmm.
in that pecking order, and they're actually getting advice from their college advisors at school. Don't talk to your friends about these things. So here are these kids struggling with what is a stressful process no matter what, and identity formation, and now suddenly their best friends are people they're competing with. And for many students I've heard, or I've mentored through working with you, and also just my kids in their own process years ago, would say, I don't care what they say, I'm going to talk to my best friend. But there is feeling that suddenly these people who were so close to them and they felt really comfortable being vulnerable with, as rejections come in, as weightless,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they're in a different category than perhaps their friend who got into the school that they really were dreaming of for themselves. Can you speak to that and how you help soften that blow, and how you would advise parents to work with that part of the process?
I mean, I think that's, it is a really big issue, getting back to, again, this sort of social pressure that they're feeling. Both, I've seen everything. I've seen people who they won't talk about it at all. The school says don't talk about it, thinking that that's going to, make things better. Or that's all they can talk about with their friends. Their friends are all really, really obsessed with it, and, giving each other advice, maybe not always with expertise. Um, there's such a, it's sort of two ends of the same issue, right? Like the intensity of it, and all of a sudden, how do you take your social life that was something that was maybe a little bit more separate from school achievement, social life and status maybe always do go hand in hand, but not in this intense way. And fold in this level of competition that's implicit, that's real, right? It's hard. I think having, for people who are fortunate to have resources for this, or there's even some nonprofit programs, but having space to work on your college prep is actually really, really helpful, because it does, when you know that you have dedicated meetings with somebody who, again, is going to take you seriously, is not going to tell you it doesn't matter, but is actually going to kind of help you figure out, again, journey and destination, things you can do now to prepare yourself to hopefully be in a better place, to achieve those goals. That is also very helpful, right? Because you really know you have, like, it's not about, when you know you can work on it in a dedicated, productive way that you feel seen in, it helps it, less bleed out, in ways that you may not feel good about, either oversharing, undersharing. I'm not as, I never, you know, I really do encourage people to, however they're moving through the world, to not move through the world with shame, right? You shouldn't be ashamed of your dreams, and you shouldn't, um, you know, like be ashamed to talk about things. But there, as long as you're moving through the world with that authenticity, to me, there's not really a wrong or right, like talk about it, don't talk about it. But I think when people, again, make space for it in a dedicated way, they feel that they're a little bit, that it is more authentic, they're more in control, and they can be more thoughtful about, how they want to include others in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you just said a lot, and I think that I just want to underline that last piece about being thoughtful about it. Some of the people I've worked with, including some of the wonderful students you've introduced me to, have taken it upon themselves in their friend groups to talk about how they're going to talk about it before
Mm-hmm.
the process starts, certainly in the final year where applications are due. And I think it's really important because those are the people they've gone to all these years when something was wrong or something didn't feel good. So what
Mm-hmm.
happened all of a sudden?
Yes.
Can't have that. So I think that that's a good strategy, being thoughtful and having the conversation about how to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. And that happened. We don't advertise. So all of our students kind of come to us through referrals, and therefore we know a lot of friends groups, even if, it's sort of a happy accident. And I see that it's possible to do that in a positive way. It is not impossible. I have definitely seen students who are ambitious, who themselves, are stress, but do maybe a healthy kind of stress, because they're working towards something really hard. And they have good friends who are also in that same boat and still support them. I've definitely seen that. It is absolutely possible. But of course, we all know those stories where it doesn't go that way. And it can be, unfortunately, a strain on friendships if people, are not equipped to feel empowered and to feel that they can make authentic decisions and that they can be safe with their friends.
So can we turn our attention now to like social social media and AI and all these things that are happening in the world that are influencing where students live and how that influences the college process, or does it influence the college process, the journey, I guess, the journey towards college.
Well, I think there is starting to be a lot of growing awareness, even in this cohort, about, the toxicity of social media, the downsides of social media. It's, I've been doing this long enough that I actually have seen a lot of the messaging that you're doing, Robin, and other experts in this field breaking through, which is awesome. I think, I do actually think many students are on their phones less, or or opting out of social media because they understand what to look for in terms of how it's impacting their mental health. So not everybody, of course, not every adult also too, but I think there's things are starting to change for the people that are kind of plugged in. And that's one of the reasons that your work is so important. And I do think anecdotally, at least for me, I've seen it breaking through a little bit. But there's still it's still there, right? Social media is still obviously very popular. And, I guess it just sort of tracks with that whole, it's public, right? It's one of the reasons that this is so much pressure for the students is it's so intensely public. And even back in the day when we were getting our fat envelopes, like it was a little bit more private, although of course, certainly everybody would ask, people know where everybody went to college, right? People could ask, but it's not the same as what's happening today, which is everybody in the world will get a notification from Yale at 5 p.m. on December 11th. And if you don't post on your social media that you're going to Yale at 5:05 p.m., everyone knows you didn't get in. Right. So it is more intense and more magnified. Some schools have some rules around that. You're not allowed to, I mean, like there are communities that are kind of getting together to have conversations about how that impacts people's mental health. And again, some high schools will say like this is our school policy for how you share this information. But certainly, most don't. And it amplifies it. Everybody knows. I've definitely worked with a student and they've gotten some really big victory. And I will get lots of congratulations from like other adults in their orbit that I didn't even know necessarily knew. It's a public forum now, and it is a public announcement, and that certainly contributes to a lot of the pressure people feel.
What do you do and advise parents to do to protect for someone to protect their self-esteem? I mean, everyone will feel
Mhm.
disappointment, but not everyone will go down the rabbit hole of I'm not good enough and
Yeah,
I'm just defeated and I why bother, etc. Um,
yeah.
what do you do about that?
Well, one of the biggest tools in our toolkit is really, again, focusing, all the lead up to the applications, right? Really making sure that we're working with students who, frankly, are proud of themselves regardless. Now, I'm not naive to say that, of course, it's not a disappointment if they don't get in where they want. I mean, if it is, it's a disappointment. But usually, if you know that you have done the work, and what I mean by that is the work in addition to your schoolwork, like the work of becoming somebody who is contributing, to society and who can articulate how they want to contribute to a college community. It's a little bit of armor because it also gives you some confidence to say, well, if this one didn't work out, I feel that something else will. Like I actually feel that I am a really qualified applicant and that I have something to offer. And that I put that down on paper and I've done the work to really, I've read this thing a million times. My parents have, everybody, like I know what I sent in was really strong. And even if this one place didn't pick me for whatever reason, it gives me a little bit more optimism that like either maybe I got deferred and I will then be accepted next time, or someone else great will take me. So that's one of the, best tools is to really like usually if everybody thinks it's excellent, right? Like it will work out. Someone will say yes, someone great will say yes. So that's one thing. But I think like I guess I should say another maybe potential hidden benefit of the huge amount of reporting and there's like the media coverage on how hard it is to get into college now. In a way, I mean, again, I want all my students to have their first choice, and that's what we all want for them. But I think there's just awareness that really, really awesome people aren't necessarily, always getting in where they want. And that actually helps a little bit because I think, again, there's just the public is more educated. There was a period where, I mean, the applications have really just been increasing over, the last 4 or 5 decades. But, that kind of middle period where it was much harder, but the media hadn't really caught up to it was almost, worse than where we are now because kind of everyone knows how hard it is. It's just so hard to get into any Ivy League school. And I think, especially the students. So whereas that's one of the places that the pressure comes from, it's also one of the, like as collectively, I see so much more kind of, I don't know if it's exactly the right word, but like humility with the students. Like they know other kids who were amazing and didn't get into X, Y, and Z place. So, hopefully that also gives them a little protection. But I would say, it's probably all the same parenting things, right? Like showing people unconditional love, right? I mean, and doing and doing that in a consistent way from, birth to age 18. Like you the kids know that stuff, right? Like if they know when love is unconditional and they know when they have safety and they know when their self-worth is not tied to achievement or accolades or trophies. Or I would also say to parents, making sure that you're doing your own self-care in all the ways. I think like making sure you are living a fulfilling and meaningful life, that it is clear to your child that, your status is not resting on this, that your friendships are not resting on this, that you don't feel shame because they didn't get X, Y, and Z. That is really important, right?
Really important. Thank you for bringing that up. I know a lot of parents um, who do feel really terribly when don't even want to talk about it when their child doesn't get into
Mhm.
um, to the school that they think the child should go to. I remember going to parent meetings when my children were young, and parents were talking about how important it was for them for their child to be that legacy child in the Ivy League.
Yes. I think there's some layers to that. So there's the version where um, the parent, honestly, it does raise their social status when their kids are really smart and, they want to be the perfect parent and they want to be that go-to that everyone had to do it or what, like everyone admires, right? I mean, there is that. And I think that's something, if it's human, but it's definitely something I would very much encourage parents to work through early, right? And understanding that that's not a great, there's so many other ways maybe to get status and respect and esteem from your community. So that would be an important kind of piece of advice. And again, we're all human and no judgment, but that would, I think we all could agree from, 20,000 feet that that's something any parent should try to work through. But there's also that other kind of parental motivation, which is our shame, right? Did we do like, what did we do wrong? Or how come we couldn't, provide the right kind of guidance or whatever? We didn't set our kids up for success, or we didn't do enough, or we did somehow this is our fault, right? Our kids are not, and of course, that's a lot of our culture, right? Where there's a lot of cultural things now that, are anchored in parental shame and parental, kind of like impossible standards. And that goes for for so many aspects of parenting. To me, it's so obvious, especially when I leave America. I always notice that, like how we have a very pressurized and individualized parenting culture, right? Like where that is not always true elsewhere. But it's, as much as we can like label it, step back, think critically about it, try our best not to ingest that, try our best not to see that our role as parents is not only to help our students, our kids achieve, it's also to help them be good people, to be resilient, by the way, because I'm sure, many people who didn't get into their first choice college still went on to lead amazing, amazing lives, and to try to model that. But there's a lot of pressure, again, like there's a lot of toxicity to our parenting culture and a lot of pressure on parents for results, and this is a very tangible one that, people ask, where's your kid going? And, I'm sure, look, like I have a friend who I just was talking to, who I went to college with. And so their double legacy, she met her husband there, the double legacy at Dartmouth. And, her children are not going to those kinds of colleges. And, people have some she's lucky enough to, fortunate enough to be really healthy and to recognize that as those people's problems. But, she absolutely encounters judgment when she, tells her Dartmouth friends where her kids are going. And that will happen. I mean, I think also maybe prepare for it, that you may have some jerks who might put that on you.
I'm going to switch quickly to ask you if students are writing their applications with the use of AI.
No way. They're not allowed to do that.
Tell me about that, and tell our audience, because there is a lot of conversation about what's happening at the level of high school and AI.
I mean, AI, look, it's not there yet for college essays. It's just, it makes tons and even the one that you might be tempted to use it for, where it could maybe be one of the, sometimes AI can be a first draft, right? There's a lot of essays that are, why do you want to go to this college, right? However, it's actually not even up to par really for that, because it makes so many mistakes. Like it will put the wrong professor name, the wrong, it's just not, there's really, don't use AI for your college essays, anyone who's listening. First of all, some schools have software, not as many as you would think, because the detection software is also not perfect yet either, right? So false positives wouldn't be fair. And, it's certainly not everybody, but it could happen any year, any time. They could just say, now we're using detection software. You should be prepared for that. They can also say that after you've submitted it. So it's cheating. Cheating is wrong. And the consequences are extremely, extremely punitive before you enroll. Because if you get caught cheating in your application, you're a huge liability for the college, and they don't mind kicking you out before you've actually attended. So I would just caution anybody from, it's cheating. Let's just keep it that way. But it's also not good writing yet. So, there's two reasons not to do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So I really think, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes, but not before I ask you, what do you think is the future Like, what does the future look like, given how college admissions has evolved, how there's more emphasis, and particularly your emphasis on the journey, not just the destination. I love how you talk about that. I think it's really important and really wise and true. And given the changes in our world, what do you expect down the road? Will it get easier? Will it get harder? Will there be more uh, acceptance of the lesser schools than the Ivy League? What are your thoughts?
Well, I already think there is more understanding that, a college like BU is as selective as Yale was, when we were applying. So I do think there's more understanding that the group of top colleges has definitely expanded beyond the Ivy League. Um, but I think, it's interesting. I'm starting to see what I consider to be a really positive trend emerging in admissions, right? And some of it came from because they were forced to rethink their policies, right? They're now affirmative action, for example, is illegal. You can't have any race conscious admissions practices. We'll see where it goes with legacy. Right now, I don't think that's going to be major changes given all the federal funding freezes and the way that colleges are squeezed financially. But if that settles in the future, I think there may be some legitimate questions around legacy admissions. But most importantly, I'm starting to see a much bigger emphasis in the admissions office on finding students who are actually rehearsed and invested in dialogue skills. So how have you talked to people who are different than you? How do you actually resolve conflict or come to some kind of consensus? It reminds me a lot about, I've told Melissa this, the work she does with peace education, a lot of emphasis on those kinds of skills. And I think that is a hugely positive development and something that we're really always in our staff meetings. And, we have a whole innovation team that tries to go out and help students work on projects or find internships. How can we infuse opportunities for these students to actually talk to people who are different, to go and expose themselves to points of view and ways of life that are different. And even when we think we are right, like if we're working on important issues for social justice or equality, and that's our goal, if we don't listen, if we don't interact, if we don't build coalitions, if we don't frankly sometimes even understand that allyship is complicated, we're never going to be successful. And I think that has been a hugely positive development in admissions and something that I hope to see more and more of in terms of what the colleges are valuing. I think they unfortunately took many crises on campuses to get there, where people are, students and faculty were not able to do that in a respectful way. But I think, ironically, even though, we can certainly argue with some of the forcefulness of the directives or the way that the federal government is, tying us to threats around funding freezes or tax exemption or or academic freedom. Frankly, I think there, behind the scenes, there is an acknowledgement that some of these issues are serious and need to be addressed for the future of higher education. That we do need to teach students that when we talk about diversity, it's not just a specific type of diversity, it is diversity of viewpoint, diversity of background, diversity of political ideology. And we do need to make more room for people who, are conservative or don't agree with, with with us, with me. We have to make room for that. So I think that's been very positive, actually.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that that is actually happening in college applications. And I agree. I think it's of the moment and of the future and really necessary. And last question, what do you do for fun outside of working on this really important stuff for everyone else?
Well, I actually, one of the best parts of my job that I do consider fun is, I'm very engaged with my own philanthropy. I really, it's part of work too, because I'm always looking for awesome opportunities for my students, and I get to really, I try as much as possible to that's most of the networking I do, is like, who is working on something that's interesting, who is trying to make this world better. Whether it's a candidate who's running for office, or people who are working in nonprofits or think tanks, or, just all different kinds of initiatives. And that gives me so much joy and hope, because I really do get to see just such a huge, huge menu of ways that people are working to make the world better. So that's one thing I like to do for fun. But I otherwise I also, especially since the pandemic, I know a lot of us, have realized the importance of our friendships. So I really actually do try to show up for friends, and be a good friend, and make plans with friends, and do a lot of IRL things with friends. I treasure my friends, and I'm somebody who, I love to make new friends too, not only old friends. So that's something I do for fun. And I love my own kids, so I also, my job gives me so much perspective on how fast it goes. It's like my son is now in ninth grade, and I can hardly believe it, because I just know with my students, even that I start with in ninth grade, how quickly it goes before they're out of the house. So that's also I love to spend time with my own kids for fun, and, do things with them, and try to just, you know, have some activities or things or hobbies that we enjoy together, because I know that it will go fast, and they won't be in the house forever. And hopefully they will be at great colleges, but more important, I hope that they will be happy, and that they will be contributing, and they will be helping others, and find a sense of purpose.
Well, they're certainly getting a fantastic start with you as their mom, and I know you have a wonderful husband who is values aligned, and they're very lucky to have you as emotionally intelligent parents along the way.
Well, there are the greatest teachers, as you know. It's the truth.
Yes, it is so true. And of course, I have the privilege of knowing your amazing mother, and so you got an amazing start in life.
I did. Yes, that's always, yes. Thank you, mom, and my own mom and dad. Thank you.
Shout out to Wendy and Arnie.
Yes.
When people click off this podcast and they want
Mhm.
to, where do they go?
Well, my company is called College Prep 360, and you can just find us on the web, collegeprep360.com. We're happy to talk to anybody. And they can buy my books on Amazon, or in Barnes and Noble. I think still carries them in real life too. But, basically wherever books are sold.
So if people have questions for Dr. Joie or for her team,
Yeah, they can reach out. They can absolutely reach out and ask them, and they will get to me.
wonderful. I forgot to ask you whether you've seen any gaslighting in the process. And the reason I'm asking is that when my kids were young, I remember going to these parent meetings, and this is not to say bad things about any of the schools they went to.
Mhm.
School had wonderful admissions people and
Mhm.
heads schools. At the same time, uh, parents were asked to believe that it was that their grades weren't important. In high school, developing a love of learning.
Mhm.
Parents I was sitting with at the time were, we all looked at each other. We said, "That's not true." So we
Mhm.
actually gaslighted because we actually didn't believe it. But
Right. Yeah.
feel like there was an attempt to make us believe something that wasn't real about the college process. And it was an attempt to help us steer our kids perhaps in the direction of journey rather than
Mhm.
destination. At the same time, some of that maybe common rhetoric, I don't know, is can feel manipulative.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Can you talk about that just for a minute or so?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as I said before, I feel like one of the worst things you can say to a young person who is doing something important, which is to have hopes and dreams and ambitions, is this doesn't matter. That's very gaslighting. And schools with good intentions do that all the time. It's not because, their intentions are they want to keep community and not foster competition, right? But it is gaslighting, because the rhetoric they use, like, minimizing it, dismissing it. I've had so many students whose college counselor at school told them not to bother applying, who then got into their first choice school, right? And, you know, one thing we always try to do is embrace potential, right? So if you didn't have the best freshman year, that doesn't mean you can't, let's start now. Let's go as big as we can. And the student has to do it. I'm not taking their test for them. I'm not doing their service for that. But I always want to make space and hold space for their dreams, right? And I think that's really, and to take them seriously, that's really important. And I think a lot of schools, again, it's not malicious. It is, it could be coming from the absolute best place, which is wanting to, amplify community and minimize competition. But it often has this gaslighting effect of, frankly, saying things that aren't true. These things don't matter, or, to minimizing or saying untruths or making people feel dismissed. That does happen all the time in the school setting, and it's not helpful. It's, I think there's just so many more constructive ways to take those positive instincts that students have when they are dreaming big, and to channel them into something that can actually validate them and help them grow, and be a little carrot, which never hurts. And to then shift from sort of status or trophy to, okay, ambition is great. Let's help you figure out, what you can do. How can you contribute? How can you grow?
So when getting these gaslighting messages, how can they protect themselves from uh, believing them?
I mean, I think, under maybe critical thinking is always important, right? So first labeling, figuring out, this is what's happening. You don't have to do it with animosity. You can understand that maybe it's even, kind of coming from a potentially, quote unquote, good place, right? It's not personal. It's not always because they don't think you can do it. But it's maybe they're trying to protect you, right? Maybe they think that they've seen other amazing people like you who haven't actually, gotten in. And so they're trying to say that not because they don't believe in you, but because they don't want you to get hurt.
And I'll just add to that, sorry to cut you off, but I want to make sure that I don't lose my thought here, which is that parents often will inadvertently gaslight their children if because they're feeling anxious about the place that they're afraid their child could go to, or a feeling their child might have. And so we don't want to say to parents, you're doing bad things. We just want to say to parents, be mindful of the
Right.
messages, because
Yes.
from our own want to protect our kids, and I
Hmm.
as well, from our own want to protect our,
Hmm.
we might be saying things that kids are misinterpreting.
I think I think in the parent-child relationship, one thing that's so important is, take your kids seriously, right? Like we as we know rationally, and we all have that instinct, and it's, it kills us often when we see, bad things happen to our children. It's almost sometimes harder than when they happen to us. But we also know we can't protect them from everything, and we shouldn't want to, because they need to gain resilience. But, it's also really important to understand that, like, again, it's a good thing for them to be ambitious if they are. It doesn't mean that it has to be completely. I've known so many, you know, not amazing admissions officers. Like, I wouldn't tie my whole self-worth, I would, or encourage anybody to tie their whole self-worth to, what some admissions officer thinks. But again, taking them seriously, embracing that they want to be ambitious, helping them hold space for that, and helping them work through that is really good. And, even if we want to protect them from rejection, to remind ourselves that, it's futile, if that's helpful to remind yourself, right? You just actually can't. And really, that shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be to raise people who have self-esteem and support and safety to recover. And we all, obviously, we all know that that's the actual skill that we need to succeed.
Thank you so much for your wisdom on gaslighting as well in the process. And really appreciate your time this morning, and really appreciate everything you've shared with our audience. I know people took away lots of goodies, intellectual goodies and emotional goodies from today's recording. And I really, I wish that at the time that I and all of our friends were going through the college journey and process, that I knew you then.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, but you're a good example of how it always works out if you let it, right? So, it's an honor to be here and thank you for all the work you do in reminding us that, it is an emotional and, psychological journey as well. And these are important things to think about. And I think there's, been so much more awareness of that, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much. And take your kids seriously. Great parting message.
They appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me for today's episode. I hope you found it helpful and meaningful. If you want to listen to other episodes of the Gaslight Effect Podcast, you can find them at robinstern.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please leave a rating and a review. I also invite you to follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. This podcast is produced by Mel Yellen, Mike Lenz, and me. All of my work is supported by Susan Pettit, Marcus Estevez, and Imaginarium. Also by Sally McCartan and Jackie Daniels. I'm so grateful to have many people supporting me, and especially grateful for all of you, my listeners.